By 2030, 70% of the skills needed to do jobs will have changed. So that just shows you how quickly things are changing in the world of work. Career paths continue to become increasingly nonlinear. Therefore, organizations that are really focusing on career development are actually going to be set up the best for future success because they'll be more agile, they'll have people that have the right skills, and they'll be able to plug those skills into the specific areas they need them. Everyone is going to need to become AI fluent, bottom line, no matter what. But then there are some things, some old standbys that maybe we haven't focused on as much recently because we've been focused on technical skills and hard skills. Things like creativity, curiosity, emotional intelligence, all of those things that AI doesn't do well are becoming increasingly important now. So those are the things that are starting to emerge. Like we need a combination of up-to-date technical skills, but really those human skills that lead us all to become more successful in our relationships and working with other people.
Kevin, really good to have you today. I am super excited to get to do this episode. It's been really awesome getting to know you, your work in talent management at LinkedIn and abroad. Thank you for joining.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Well, why don't we dive straight in? First of all, of course, LinkedIn does a lot of research around the future of work. Can you start by sharing some of the top insights you've seen from LinkedIn's latest research around the future of work that you found either most surprising or counterintuitive?
Yeah, we produce the workplace learning report every year. We also produce a job change report that came out earlier this year. And there were some interesting things in those. I think the thing that surprised me most was how quickly skills are changing. Our data suggests that by 2030, 70% of the skills needed to do jobs will have changed. So that just shows you how quickly things are changing in the world of work. I think the other thing that really stood out was career paths continue to become increasingly nonlinear. Therefore, organizations that are really focusing on career development are actually going to be set up the best for future success because they'll be more agile, they'll have people that have the right skills, and they'll be able to plug those skills into the specific areas they need them. Those are the things that are really top of mind for a lot of folks in the talent management, talent development space right now.
Were there any particular skills you saw in sort of the rapidly changing skill landscape that you didn't expect?
I think what emerged from the data was that it wasn't such a focus on hard skills. There are some technical skills that we're all going to need to develop. Everyone is going to need to become AI fluent, bottom line, no matter what. But then there are some things, some old standbys that maybe we haven't focused on as much recently because we've been focused on technical skills and hard skills, but things like creativity, curiosity, emotional intelligence, all of those things that AI doesn't do well are becoming increasingly important now. So those are the things that are starting to emerge. Like we need a combination of up-to-date technical skills, but really those human skills that lead us all to become, more successful in our relationships and working with other people.
That resonates. I mean, it feels like AI is an incredibly powerful tool, but it is ultimately a tool, right? And you need the skills to be able to wield those tools really well. And I think you need to be able to set the right vision in how you want to use it, set the bar in what you want to create with it, and then have the agencies to really push the tool to do the kind of things you want to do. And it sounds like those are the more like advanced human skills that are needed.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is some folks are concerned that adopting AI is going to weaken our critical thinking skills because we're outsourcing critical thinking to AI. But in reality, we actually need to be better critical thinkers so that we know what we're using AI for and how we're using it to get the results that we want.
Yeah, for sure. There was a recent article from HBR that talked about the rise of AI generated work slop. I don't know if you saw that.
No,
Um,
I didn't.
the idea was basically that using AI requires more critical thinking, but when you have employees who are not using that while using AI, then what happens is there's proliferation of outputs that are flat and just not high quality and like riddled with issues. And actually it becomes the manager's role to then parse through just like heaps of outputs that are not very good, right? So that's what they call by work slop. So how do you equip people to apply the critical thinking that you need to use AI appropriately, I think is like a real challenge.
It is a challenge. And I think it's interesting as well that in my space, in talent development specifically, we think a lot about preparing people for the future. In reality, with AI, there's a little bit that we can do to prepare people, but that is changing so quickly. What we're trying to convince people to do is just get out there and play with things and experiment so that they are shifting their mindset to an AI first mindset, because we're not going to be able to keep up with all of the training related to technical aspects of AI tools.
Yeah. Well, this is a good segue to the second piece of the trend you mentioned, which I would love to dive more into, this idea of rise of nonlinear career paths, right? Which I think has so many implications. Maybe we can start by, what do you think is the most critical implication of this phenomenon on how organizations manage their talent?
I like this topic a lot because I've had a nonlinear career path myself. I started out as an actor. I moved into the corporate world. I was in sales operations for a while. Now I'm working in talent development at LinkedIn. So it's been quite a tangled path, I think, for myself. So what I am discovering in conversations with people about this topic is that organizations have to change the way they're thinking about developing their people. And people have to think differently about how they're developing their own careers. That's a challenge for folks. They're used to this idea that, well, if I just climb the ladder or if I just take the next step, they think there's an obvious next step. They're going to reach some sort of common level of success, whatever we've defined that as. When in reality, that definition is changing all the time. And those ladders, those staircases to the next level don't exist in the same way they have in the past. Organizations really are, in some cases, struggling, and in other cases, are really thinking creatively about how they're offering career development to their employees. One thing that I think is critical to, really take a more forward-thinking approach is being able to identify skills related to the jobs to be done in your organization, being able to assess them with your people. As we get into this sort of era of the nonlinear career path, you're going to see more things like talent marketplaces showing up. Traditional team structures may change. You'll find more people working in pods and squads on specific projects or initiatives, as opposed to the more formal team structures that we're all used to. So I think that'll be an interesting adjustment.
Yeah, today most people are very used to the traditional education system where you finish grade 1 and you go to grade 2 and you go to 3, grade 4, and you like finish in high school, and maybe you just decide to go get a college degree or you go to some other sort of schooling, or right. But it's a very structured thing, and you sort of know, oh, I fall into one of these buckets. As you said, like if things are becoming nonlinear, ultimately people who are going to thrive are the ones that have higher sense of agency and ability to make a decision for their own lives, which also requires higher level of self-awareness, risk-taking, and all of that, right? And so I feel like organizations have to foster an environment that enables people to lean into those kinds of sides of themselves, not sort of the safety seeking, kind of the rule following tradition.
Absolutely. Some of the research, again, that LinkedIn has done suggests that people that join the workforce now are going to have twice as many jobs as people that joined the workforce 15 years ago.
Mm.
And a good chunk of those people are going to be doing jobs whose title didn't exist in the year 2000, right? Like they're completely new jobs. And so we've got to really think about what are the skills needed to accomplish the work to be done, and think less about like leveling of roles, essentially. I think one of the other things that stands out to me is that we really are in this place where we're starting to have the ability to do that better and better because of AI. So AI tools can now infer some skills related to the jobs to be done. They can also infer some skills that people on your teams or in your organizations may have by looking at the work they've done. And once you have that data, you have a really interesting landscape in which to work in terms of matching people with the right skills to the right work to be done. Some organizations are already doing that. Some are just starting out on the journey. But I think that's going to be a real evolution for a lot of companies, especially maybe more traditional organizations.
One question I have is, I think people are inherently quite motivated by the sense of upward trajectory, progress, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it be roles, responsibility, salary, whatever it might be, in a less linear path, how do you think organizations can create that sense of progress and trajectory
Yeah.
when things are not so linear?
It's an interesting challenge. We're talking about it internally. Other companies are talking about this internally as well. One of the things we can consider is personalized career development. So, beyond just thinking of, well, obviously Kevin wants to get promoted to the next level, that's going to be his motivator. If there's not an opportunity to promote Kevin to the next level, what are some other motivators of his? So we really want to get to a place where we understand our people, what motivates them, what fulfills them in their work or about their work, and then look for opportunities to engage those motivators wherever possible. And obviously, as the sort of landscape changes and we see people working in different structures like pods and squads, how are you recognizing people's contributions to specific projects? So it becomes a little bit less about the title and the compensation associated with the title and more about what's the work being done, what are the unique contributions this individual can bring, and then offering them or recognizing and rewarding them for those contributions specifically.
Can you share a little bit more what you mean by pods and squads? It sounds like you're talking more about things moving into like more sense of projects rather than these functions where you're like in this function and that's what you just do like all your time there. But I would love to hear a little bit more what you have in mind there.
Yeah. So when we're talking about pods and squads, we're talking about bringing people together with unique skill sets that can all contribute to a specific project or initiative within an organization. I'll use an example of something we worked on at LinkedIn last spring. We did a session we called LinkedIn Learning Live. It was a great project where we worked with LinkedIn Learning course authors, brought them in to do speaking engagements internally with us. That required a whole lot of skills that I don't personally have. So while I was leading the project, I was bringing in folks from our comms team, LinkedIn Learning content team, from our employee experience team, from HR enablement. So we had all of these folks from different parts of the organization coming together around this particular project. What we found was that it was a really great way to get things done rather than if it was just on my team in talent development, if that was our responsibility to make this happen, we don't have necessarily the same skills around communications or even access to the same channels to communicate with our people necessarily. We don't necessarily have the same project management expertise of someone in HR enablement. We definitely don't have the relationships with the LinkedIn Learning course authors that our content team does. By bringing everyone together, we were able to like much more efficiently execute this project and let everybody who has sort of their own areas of expertise shine in those areas at the same time.
I love that example. And you know what that makes me think about is I would usually consider an enterprise's work into two buckets. There's the BAU kind of work and there's change type of work. Like that thing you described to me, it feels more like a change type of work. You're like introducing something new and different in this initiative. I suspect when you talk about like rise of pods and squads and stuff like that, is a lot of the BAU stuff will require less people than however many people you need today because a lot of the actual BAU stuff typically is very stable, which means a lot of it could be automated. But I think the role of humans would be driving the positive change in the organization to improve things. And in fact, the rate of change will increase more and more and more. So then if you need to drive change, you have to conceptualize these like initiatives or projects. And so you could imagine a company having actually like a much bigger portfolio of change things going on that people are getting like staffed onto to drive the work. I feel like that's sort of what you're saying.
I think that's what we're going to see more and more of in the future. I think a lot of organizations, I would say most all organizations, are experiencing such significant disruption more and more regularly that it requires us to work in these more agile ways. You're right. Some of the BAU stuff will get outsourced to AI. Some of it we'll have to hold on to, but we may go about working on it in different ways. The bulk of the work is going to be around, wow, The context all around us has just shifted again. What do we need to do to adapt and flex into new spaces? Which is where I think pods and squads and this sort of new agile way of thinking about our work is going to come in the most handy, right? As opposed to just relying on our traditional silos to take pieces of different projects.
Yeah, this actually reminds me of one of the things you and I talked about last time when we chat in person, which is it just sounds a lot like how consulting firms operate. Like I come from McKinsey, where obviously as a consulting firm, everything you do is a change project you're doing for a client. After every study, you're like now looking for the next study to get staffed onto, and there's some like matching of skills and experiences there. But then there's also interesting inspiration you can get from that, because if that's really the parallel, consulting firms have a really good way of providing upper trajectory to people in a world where you're not on the same team. Like your role's constantly shifting, but the upper trajectory it's kind of a conceptual set of responsibilities that are getting added to you. Like if you're junior, you lead like one task or a work stream. Then as you go up, you like own multiple work streams, and then you like lead a team, and then you orchestrate multiple teams, and then you orchestrate multiple teams of teams, right? Like, so it's actually just that you're adding more and more judgment on top. And I suspect if we went in this direction, then you need a talent management that recognizes people's almost like orchestration capabilities to lead bigger and bigger initiatives and exercise that judgment.
Yeah, and I think that's why we're seeing that those human skills are the critical skills that are emerging in a lot of ways. Because what does it take to lead more and more work streams? Well, it takes really great collaboration. It takes really great strategic thinking, visioning, those sorts of things. Emotional intelligence, because you're working with so many different types of people. So I think that's, to your point, as this sort of evolves and becomes more common in our workplaces, that's why I think those skills are emerging as such important skills to have.
Yeah, I've always thought the rise of human skills sort of made sense, but this is the first conversation where I feel like the sequence of the causal links feel very clear, like in the organizations. So it's very interesting. Are you seeing this like actively play out already in your own teams or with any other organizations you talk to, where people are really thinking about the need to support more change initiatives and therefore structure their talent management differently, and therefore all these changes that we're talking about? Is it very intentional today, or are people still not quite sure what to do for the most part?
I think it's across the board. I think some organizations are being very intentional and probably leading the way in this space, and some probably have a lot of room to grow. One example that emerged from some of our research was at IBM, where they're using AI to infer skills related to jobs to be done, as well as to infer skills that our people have based on, like I said before, kind of the work they've done to date. And they feed all of that information into their talent marketplace. And so they have a space for where people can go out and look and say like, oh, I have this set of skills. I could apply it in a totally different role or a totally different project than what I'm used to using that I'm on. From there, the organization becomes more agile and more ready to deal with things as they pop up, because they know what skills they have internally. They know where they may need to build skills that they don't have. That helps prepare them for whatever's ahead, the future disruptions. Organizations that are at the start of that journey probably, are facing some challenges where it can be tough to identify skills. It can be tough to identify even what are the actual tasks or jobs to be done within a particular body of work or function. There's a lot of different approaches you could take to this work. I think that starting with assessing what are the business priorities, what are the skills needed to achieve those business priorities is where you've got to start.
Yeah.
And then assessing, do we have those skills internally? And if so, what's going to be our process for matching skills to gaps that we have on certain teams and projects?
I think you're right that it's a massive like data problem today, and most organizations do not have good data on this. So even the starting point, they're a little bit constrained. I've heard of the concept of talent marketplace a bunch, but I have yet to really meet an organization that's mature with it or seems to be seeing a lot of success with it yet. But that's not to say they might exist. I just might not know them. I'm curious if you've run into organizations you feel like, oh, they've really cracked this thing and it's going.
I don't know if anybody's totally cracked it. And again, I don't know everyone in the world. I think IBM is a good example of that because they have a pretty robust sort of system, it sounds like, for capturing skills and matching them to opportunities. It's also going to be sort of different for every organization based on things like their industry, the maturity level of their talent sort of ecosystem internally. Do they have any job architecture or talent architecture work going on? What is their focus on internal mobility right now? If those things don't currently exist, they may need to start with like, let's look at one job family within finance. Let's just test this out, and start small and then grow bigger and evolve over time. But I think there's probably not one set roadmap to this that is going to work for every organization.
That makes sense. And I to your point, I think the starting point matters a lot, right? Because depending on which industry you're in, there are multiple pieces that need to be in place for a talent marketplace to thrive. And depending on the industry you're in and type of organization you are, you're probably further along on some dimensions versus other. Like, for example, we already talked about the need for data and infrastructure. I also think you need some sort of a staffing method, right? Because people need to get like staffed in the talent marketplace. So you need like that almost as a culture and a process. You also need talent and internal employees who are willing to embrace this concept of I am like regularly switching my job and role keeps on evolving. And depending on where you are, that might be very natural or that might feel very foreign for people and sort of unsettling. And so it feels like there's a lot of different pieces of the puzzle that need to come right. And you might be further along in some dimensions versus not.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, there's a piece that's the infrastructure of like, can we even do this through our systems? And then there's the mindset of our employees piece. And I think those are probably parallel work streams that need to be worked on simultaneously because you're right. Employees aren't necessarily going to just be like, oh, great, go sign me up for an extra project because I have these skills on top of what I'm already responsible for. So it's not only a change in how the organization operates, but it's a change in how individuals think about the work that they do and the value they bring to the organization. I think that you can run into identity issues for people. I'm part of talent development. If you're going to staff me on a project that's related to employee experience or something like that, who am I now? Am I an employee experience
Yeah.
employee or a talent development employee? So that can be a struggle for people as well. We've really got to explain to people why we're rethinking the way we get work done. So it's not just a top down, HR said we're doing squads and pods now. I don't know what that means and for my job now. So that people really buy in and they understand the opportunity involved in working this way.
I have a question whether this conversation about operating model, talent marketplace, and so on, whether you see it happening with business leaders and they're really like owning the problem, or is it mostly currently still like kind of an HR people function thing and the businesses kind of don't really get it or talk about it? Where do you see the dialogue right now?
I think some organizations are really bought in. They've been able to explain, the benefits to the business leaders and yay, they've sold them on it. Right now, for a lot of organizations, it sits with HR because they're the ones doing some of the work that feeds into what eventually becomes a talent marketplace. So if you've got folks in HR, whether it's HRBPs or talent architects, if you're lucky enough to have them, they're the ones looking at the job families and the job sort of codes related to the work that the people are doing and that sort of thing to document all of those things. Well, that's like a small piece of the larger puzzle. But if you've got a really visionary leader who can see all of the pieces and how they can come together, that's, I think, where you're going to see a lot of success. We did some survey research. What came out was that only about 36% of organizations are what LinkedIn, by our definition, would consider career champion organizations, meaning that they have worked on identifying skills and opportunities and matching situations, and they offer people multiple avenues to career growth as opposed to just a more linear or traditional path. So lots of organizations have a lot of work to do. That doesn't mean that some people aren't doing it well or that we can't all do it well. We just have to really dig into the work.
In that data around like career champions, I don't know if LinkedIn looked at the secondary cuts of those. I'm curious if there were any patterns of the types of companies that tends to be more career champions. Like for example, what I'm thinking is companies that see like enterprise agility and
Hmm.
workforce agility as a must have, because otherwise they'll get disrupted or they're going to go under or whatever it is, would be much more feeling the pressure to do this versus like slow moving industries. They're like, why do we have to change? Did LinkedIn's research look into that at all and see any patterns?
I don't have access to that level of the research, so I'm not certain on that. I suspect, similar to what you just said, that slower moving, more traditional organizations probably are not prioritizing some of these things. They're, often led by people that came up through the organization over 25 years or more to reach a leadership level. That's kind of the path they expect others to take as well. I don't want to say that's true across the board because there are probably what I would consider more traditional organizations that are out there really wrestling with this right now and potentially making some cool innovative choices related to developing their people. But if I were to make a guess generally, I would say you're right.
Yeah. So I guess based on, these conversations about the trends, the state of the career sort of ladder and all of that, what is the one to two things when you talk to other talent leaders, you would say, hey, are you thinking about this? If not, you should really think about this.
Yeah, I think skills is the number one thing. How are you identifying skills? How are you defining skills? How are you documenting skills? That will continue to be top of mind for folks for a long time, I think. I think we're just in this space where agility requires us to be able to identify skills and plug them into interesting new contexts that some of which we haven't even experienced yet. That would be my question to talent leaders across the board is like, what are you doing in the skills space? And then in turn, what are you doing around internal mobility? Every time I ask that question, I get a different answer. Some organizations, have fairly robust plans for how they may have career paths mapped out for people. That sounds a little bit more like a traditional approach to me in terms of like a linear step by step. Here's how you're going to get there. And other organizations are being really creative with how they're approaching this. And again, thinking of interesting ways to put people in interesting spots to best get the work done. And then there are going to be organizations who haven't thought about it at all. And so that's where if I get a question or if I ask the question around internal mobility and I get a blank stare, I
Yeah.
know like, oh, not top of mind for us right now.
Yeah. Maybe one last question. What are you most worried about when it comes to the current trends you see? And what are you most excited about?
Probably the thing I'm most worried about is how are you going to keep your people engaged while redefining how we're all working? Because to your earlier point, some people may not see the benefit of working in this new way right away, or they may want that linear, more traditional career path because that's what they expected coming out of school and entering the workforce. So I think I'm worried about what is our messaging. A lot of organizations are saying things like, don't expect to get promoted every 2 years like people have in the past. Don't expect linear career movement or upward mobility right away. But they're not telling us what we can expect,
Yeah.
right? So what's,
Now, what should I
yeah,
look forward to, right? Yeah.
yeah. So really work on that messaging, right? So that like you're keeping your employees bought in. There are opportunities in working in new ways. You're going to get creative with how you use your skills, those sorts of things, which leads to what I'm most excited about, which is we're going to see some really innovative ways of working. We're going to see some real creativity start to emerge because people are going to be required to work in different ways and with different people. So you're not going to stick around, the same sort of within the same sort of silo that you have been forever. And while that can be scary to step out into the unknown, it's also full of so many wonderful opportunities and a lot of opportunities to feel fulfillment in ways that you might not have expected.
Yeah. And see yourself as not boxed into this one thing, right? Because typically career boxes you into, they labels you into X, and then you're like X.
Yeah.
Actually flex your skills in different domains.
Yeah, I'm already thinking about what does that mean for me and how I talk about myself. I'm a talent development professional. Am I? Or am I creative. I solve interesting problems. I bring people together, let them sort of have the spotlight in their domains in order for us to achieve a desired outcome. Okay, that's bigger than talent development, right? Yeah, I know some stuff about adult learning theory and all of that, but like those are the skills that I think are actually going to define me going forward as opposed to my area of expertise.
It's a classic problem that you face as a former consultant. They're like, well, so what do you know? Well, we worked in so many different industries, and yet the skills of former consultants are very valued, but people don't know how to describe those skills. There's no vocabulary for it. I suspect the vocabulary should emerge actually, because these are core skills. Most people just expect, oh, like as a former consultant, you can generally like learn stuff and run obscure, unstructured projects, but drive them to finish line, right?
Yeah.
But it could be different domains. I think similarly, like you're saying, you're able to bring people together, you're able to solve problems. That's basically like how consultants would generally describe themselves. And then
Yeah.
people are like, "Do you know anything?" But it's but it's but is knowing actually the core thing, or is your ability to learn anything really quickly and then get a
I
group of
think
people to solve that problem, right?
Yeah, you're spot on. I think your ability to learn things quickly is going to be what differentiates you from the pack, essentially, because we all have areas of expertise, things that we know. And my suspicion is that as we move further into this sort of new territory, world of work, what we know isn't going to be what we lead with. What we do and how we do it is going to be what we lead with. And then what we know will come out through the work.
Right.
But in the age of AI right now, like what everybody can know what Kevin knows. Like,
Right, you can just ask it, and then like
yeah,
most of the expertise is already there. It's more about, to your point, how you take that and apply it and orchestrate people, a team of
yeah.
people to get stuff done. This was so fun, Kevin. Some of the concepts we discussed are widely discussed. For me, at least, it bring about some real crystallization of things that were like floating around my head. So thanks so much for your insight today, and hopefully this is the start of many conversations like this.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. I'm always happy to talk about this kind of stuff. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.